All right. It's like I don't quite have the volume up all the way I want it. Yes, I do. Okay, if everyone can't hear me, let me know. You should be fine, but just in case anyone's having any problems, let me know. All right? Let's go back to sharing the screen here. Okay, there we go. All right, well, this has no doubt been an issue. It's an ongoing issue. You've been out there at all, you know this has been an issue. So, uh, the question we're going to look at tonight is only some aspects of cancel culture, but whether we're not much different from cancel culture as believers. In some cases, maybe we're not, as we'll talk about. So, maybe some things to think about, maybe a little thought provoking, but you'll have to take from it what you think and tell me what you think, maybe in the question part or the question discussion section. We start talking about it afterwards. So, well, anyway, let's move on here and get going. Let's give some definitions, just talking about what cancel culture is and isn't. But so cancel culture is kind of like it's more of a social attitude that's going on where within the culture you see something that's controversial or certain speech or behavior, and then what you're seeing right away is the person or group or whatever it is might be something else where they're automatically punished. They're punished through maybe public shaming or silencing, boycotting, firing, bankrupting, deplatforming. The key is the person is canceled or deplatformed, so they don't have any voice anymore. And so the person that's done the offense generally is the one who has their reputation canceled, okay, or influence is just canceled quickly, okay? So it's more of a social attitude that's going on around the culture. It's happening all the time on social media. I'm sure you guys have seen this. Social media is really the biggest component of this because social media is allowing it to happen so quickly. But so that's kind of just general overview. But there's no doubt that we've seen where someone could be a celebrity or sports figure, a politician, or another public figure might say something offensive, considered offensive, and then there's a huge backlash, fueled by a social media, sometimes a very progressive social media, and then the call comes to cancel the person, to effectively end their career, whether it be through boycotts of their work or disciplinary action from their employer. Now, I'll talk a little bit about Christians being canceled in a minute, some things that we've seen, but it's not just pertaining to people that believe in God and are Christians or followers of Jesus. I mean, it's happening to a lot of different kinds of people, right? So, and it's happening more and more every day. I mean, everything, you can't say anything anywhere because it's already broadcast over the social media platform in like 1 minute of you saying it. I've noticed that more and more. But, most of us, I think on this call are not celebrities where everything we say is under a magnifying glass 24 hours a day. But still, we are impacted by this on a certain level. So anyway, so this has been, certainly been going on. And, part of the issue with cancel culture is it comes out kind of an outgrowth of a couple things. I don't want to oversimplify because it's not an easy topic. It's complex. It's more complex than you think it is. There's no way I could possibly give an overview of the history of it, but it's no doubt it's somewhat related to political correctness and postmodernism. And I think we know what political correctness is. That's where we, have to be very careful about what we say with certain words. We have to minimize social and institutional offenses. Things are policed a lot more easily now. And, sometimes Christians, of course, have been forced to be politically correct. What we say, where we say it, how we say it, we're policed as well. So some of it has to do with political correctness. And of course, it's all related to some aspect of postmodernism. With postmodernism, if you're not familiar with it, asserts that most of our truth claims are mostly subjective, not a lot of objectivity there because we are really creatures of our own culture. I mean, whatever we believe is the product of the way we were raised in our own culture. So everyone's got their point of view. A lot of times truth is relative. It's based on your culture, upbringing. Nobody seems to have any objective truth. and very subjective, as I said. And so one of the key aspects of postmodernism, no doubt, is being tolerant. I mean, you need to be tolerant of everyone and everything. And then if you do something that offends somebody, they're intolerant of you. So sometimes it isn't very consistent. You know what I mean? Where you're told to be tolerant, and then you give a different point of view, and then you're canceled automatically. And they don't view themselves as intolerant. They just automatically cancel you. And so some of these issues with cancel culture tied into these issues, political correctness and postmodernism, no doubt going on there. Now, one thing that maybe a positive thing that some people, if you think of cancel culture having anything positive about it, many of us are like, no, there's nothing good about it. But some people think that perhaps cancel culture leads to more accountability. There was a long time where many people of power and different positions all over the place were getting away with a lot of stuff, not a lot of accountability. With social media, obviously, a lot of things are under scrutiny now. People can see a lot more quickly. And some people think it leads to a little more accountability and transparency, calling people out on the carpet. And, sometimes it's kind of become an important tool for social justice positions. The question is, as I say, number two here, does the idea of being canceled, does it work to is a deterrent towards bad behavior? Does it really help or hurt? Is it causing people to say, who are going to do bad things or doing bad things, say, well, maybe I shouldn't do this because I'm going to be canceled? Perhaps. I mean, maybe it leads to a little more restraint there. There's more scrutiny. You're under the public eye. You can be very careful. I'm sure people are going around today, especially even Christians, who say, oh, I can't say this. I'm worried about that. I'm going to be canceled. So it certainly has raised the awareness about what you're doing. your thoughts, your actions, are going to be seen by everybody, what you say and do. And so that would be one person playing devil's advocate, saying maybe there's a positive side of cancel culture. It leads to a little more accountability and transparency. Now, there's no doubt that we're also living in the place where people are, if you disagree with other people, you're canceled automatically. You see this on Facebook and other social media platforms where someone might say, if you disagree with me, just unfriend me now. I've seen more than enough posts over the years. Social media wise, I'm really on Facebook, and that's it. I'm not on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter. I'm not on whatever else is there. TikTok. I don't know. I don't even pay attention to those platforms, but I have been on Facebook for a number of years. It's about the only social platform I use, and I know it has its challenges and problems. But anyway, so I see sometimes people start a post. They say, well, if you're going to disagree with me, just unfriend me now. Or else they may say, here's my position, and if you say this in the comments section, you will be deleted, or your comments will be deleted. So they kind of just set the standard for what they want. It is their page and their post, but that happens a lot of times too. I see that. So there's been a lot of canceling, a lot of unfriending on Facebook over the years over disagreements. I've been blocked. I've been, not much, maybe once by somebody, but I've seen where this has happened on a lot of occasions. Part of the problem is also that this whole thing is that what's happened with cancel culture and elsewhere is we've kind of definitely forgotten how to listen to people. Because we're just kind of so used to hearing the same voices all the time in our echo chambers. We just admit it, we're creatures of habit, and we do like to surround ourselves with people that agree with us and agree with our positions. That's called confirmation bias, where we just want people to confirm what we believe and what we say. We want to just be around those kinds of people. It's just the way we are as humans, okay? Sometimes we shy away from disagreement. Sometimes they don't do well with it. Sometimes we only flock to the people that are in agreement with us, and it makes it a lot easier. You're talking the same language, you're on the same wavelength, you have the same worldview. It's a lot easier to do that. And I understand. And I do have a lot of people I know that are on the same wavelength with me. It's easier to have that conversation about that difficult topic. But, in some cases, I certainly have encountered enough people doing campus ministry that don't agree with what I believe. And you just need to come on a campus, you'll hear that. But this is just something that's happened. We don't really do well listening to one another, no doubt about it. So let me give some examples quickly of some people who have been canceled. There's all kinds of stories. I don't have time to go over them all, but just some people I'm familiar with in the apologetic world, in the Christian world, and the biblical world that do a lot of speaking and teaching on college campuses. They're in the limelight, they're in the spotlight, they write a lot of books, huge social media platforms. Just people that have been canceled, just for example. So my friend Frank Turek, he has been on our campus 7 or 8 times. Actually, he's coming back in March, but he speaks on the topic, I don't have faith to be an atheist. He has a book called I Don't Have Faith to Be an Atheist. He has a ministry called Cross Examine. That actually in number 1 here, it should say, Frank Turek was fired as a consultant for Cisco and Bank of America. Sorry. I kind of slouched down to number 2 there for his traditional views of traditional marriage. There's my typo. But anyway, so before even cancel culture got really big, like the last 3 years or so, he was actually canceled a long time ago. He was, and as far as what he was doing, because he, next to his apologetic ministry, he had a side career where he would go in and train employees. He would go into companies, he'd be a consultant, he'd come in and train your employees. He'd speak to them, motivate them, go over job employment training. He would speak at huge companies. He was a consultant. So a couple of companies he went to, in Cisco and Bank of America back in 2010, I think it was around there. You can look it up online, maybe 2009 or 2010 or 11. He got fired for both of those companies. Now, when he went to do that consulting, when he went into the company to do that, he did not go in to talk about his views of marriage or anything related to the Bible. He went in to do his job. He went to do his job training. And someone Googled him while they were in the training session, looked him up online, saw that he had written a short booklet on his views of traditional marriage. Well, they went to their diversity inclusion office and told them about it. And then immediately Frank was dismissed from Cisco. They had to dismiss him, and they called him into the office and they said, we have to let you go because you don't represent our views here. And of course he said, well, how come you're not inclusive of my views? You're only inclusive of the views that, you agree with. But anyway, he was fired from Cisco, not asked to come back and do his job consulting. And the same thing happened at Bank of America. And he did not sue them. He did expose them online, though. It was all over the internet. And I think they offered an apology at most, but he lost a lot of consulting jobs because of that. And so he was canceled in that area, of not being able to go into his the companies and do the job training. Now he's still speaking on college campuses, and Cross Examine is a huge ministry, does, reaches all kinds of people. So that hasn't been canceled. But anyway, and then you had Ryan Anderson down here on the right. He wrote the book When Harry Became Sally, responding to the transgender movement that came out, I think about 8 or 9 years ago. I can't remember exactly. I have the book, but Amazon canceled his book. They took it off their shelves. And, he, of course, you can still get it, but they canceled it because he wrote a book, How to Respond to Transgenderism. So he got canceled on there. He's a Christian, a believer as well. I think he's more rooted in Catholic tradition. I think but he is strong in philosophy. But the point is that they canceled him there. So that's been for a while now. I think it happened about 2 or 3 years ago. And then you had some other people canceled. You had J.K. Rowling, who wrote the Harry Potter books. She spoke up for saying transgenderism was not correct and saying the biological sex is real. It's not fluid, as that's what transgenderism says. You pick your own gender, it's fluid. And she got totally, there's a huge backlash against her. A lot of the followers of Harry Potter, the fans, canceled her, saying she was terrible. So it's interesting. Now, that's not a Christian there. So remember, this isn't always happening to people of a religious conviction. Same thing happened to Mike Lindell. He he's the owner of the My Pillow. I still don't have his pillows. Should I get one anyway? I heard they're good. But anyway, he was canceled from nearly 20 retailers after he questioned the electoral results of the election. I don't want to get into that. That's not the goal of this call. But the point is that whatever his position was, he got canceled right away, canceled from several retailers. So boom, you have a view out there or a different perspective and you get canceled. So those are some examples, some people that have been canceled, had to deal with cancel culture. Then we had, of course, the issue with things are happening in the public schools is just one example. I mean, Washington, Lincoln, and Jefferson were canceled. They were wiped away from the San Francisco public schools after the school board decided to rename 44 schools that had ties to racism, dishonorable legacies. So they were part of the problem there, and they got canceled. That's happened. There's all kinds of people in public schools have been canceled in history. So we're not allowing kids to learn history, the good, the bad, and the ugly. We just want them to not even know who these people are. So that's been happening a lot as well, too, if you haven't noticed. So one thing about cancel culture that no doubt is there is that we're living in a culture that's part of cancel culture. Part of the problem is the fact that feelings and emotions seem to be the ultimate guides today. It seems to be that people find feelings and emotions as the main authority. If you feel a certain way about something, that's the final say. It doesn't always matter if there's strong facts behind it. It just matters you feel this and it makes you mad or makes you irritated. And by golly, that is the ultimate guide to reality. And that's, of course, that's tied in with happiness being the ultimate goal of life. And so anybody that seems to get in the way of someone's personal happiness will be removed. If you interfere with my identity, this is my identity, this is what makes me happy, get out of the way. If you say anything against that or say something that questions it, you're automatically canceled sometimes. So there's no doubt that this is part of cancel culture. This issue, this pursuit of emotions and feelings is the ultimate guide. Some of the problems are that with cancel culture is who gets to decide what is worthy of canceling, right? I mean, obviously we've seen a lot of big tech. We've seen social media canceling people or certain things, people getting canceled from YouTube, people being canceled on LinkedIn, people being canceled in this social media platform or that social media platform. No doubt big tech's controlling a lot of that, but it's interesting, that for who's the one that gets to decide who gets to cancel those with an opposing view. So that's a big part of the whole problem. Okay, who's the one who's calling the shots and gets to cancel? Now let's talk a little bit about some of the characteristics of cancel culture and then why we don't want to fall into this trap, because sometimes we do as believers, as followers of Jesus, right? Well, one thing for sure about cancel culture is it's very rash. And that means that there's a quick judgment, outrage, and snap judgments. Not a lot of concern for due process, where you don't really take a step back and say, can we look at the facts to see if the evidence is there for this judgment? A lot of times it's just, well, guilty, cancel. A lot of times it's based on partial information, biased information, of course. And of course, social media only makes it worse, because when they tweet stuff or put a meme out there or quick judgment, people just see that right away and they go, guilty, cancel, guilty, cancel. They don't have the discipline in today's world, because social media is just coming at you like this all the time. And it's so fast and you need, like, I got to figure this out right away, instead of stepping back and, waiting for due process to play its course and finding out if all the facts are there. A lot of times social media just sets the standard and we just go along with it. Right. And that's really problematic, obviously. So it's very quick and very rash. That's a problem. Also, it's very spiteful. Cancel culture can be very spiteful. That means there's a lot of vitriol. It can be very ugly. Selecting a person sometimes to be canceled can be declaring that person is worthy of hate at times. And it certainly allows someone to be slandered. It can allow someone to be slandered. So it's very, very spiteful at times. It's very ugly. And so I think we've all seen that. And sometimes it gets very depressing just watching it. So that's definitely one of the really negative aspects of the kind of cancel culture that goes on sometimes. Not all the time, but definitely, in many cases, okay? Another problem is, a huge problem is it's incredibly judgmental. That means that whoever is the self-appointed enforcer sometimes goes to great lengths to dig up material to cancel somebody. Of course, we know that in this day and age, they can dig up material on you from 20 years ago and say you did this or that, and then you're a horrible person. After all, there's no possibility someone could grow and learn from their mistakes, right? That's just an impossibility in cancel culture. You're penalized for something you did 3 decades ago at this point, right? People lose their jobs over articles written decades ago, told jokes in one's youth, something, just anything, and so right away there's a very quick judgment being made, and it's unfortunate. So it is very judgmental in some cases. And no matter what the inappropriate or hurtful speech or actions is, no doubt one thing that's coming out of cancel culture is there's no forgiveness. You are guilty as charged, and there's nothing that's going to bring you out of that. There's no room for redemption. There's no room for rehabilitation. There's no room for restoration, because that's not the goal. There's no learning from one's mistakes. It is, you are done, canceled. Now you may say, well, that's not always the case, but in most cases it is. So that's what's probably one of the most troubling things. This is tied in, let's face it. I'm just going to give some examples. If you say anything on social media about sexuality, about racial issues, about transgenderism, about maybe a political view or something, if you made it 10 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, 1 month ago, if someone catches that, I'm not saying it's the right thing. I'm not giving, not saying it should be an accountability, but I'm saying that if you do that, you can be forever canceled. You're done. There is no forgiveness. There's no apology, nothing. So this is, the extreme forms of culture, cancel culture, but it is happening. So that's one of the saddest things about it. The fact that there really isn't any forgiveness ever. So the traditional approach, where you used to have apology, atonement, you acknowledge the wrong, you try to make amends with someone and, go to them and say I was wrong, or make a public apology. It still happens. That does happen sometimes. I've seen it, but it may no longer be enough in today's cancel culture. So that traditional approach is going to be challenged a lot. There may be, in many cases, no forgiveness, or maybe you apologize and the person still cancels you, right? Or the group still cancels you, whatever. But the point is that cancel culture definitely leads to grudges. It leads to resentment. It leads to long-term resentment. So this is part of one of the challenges we have, no doubt about it. One of the other problems with cancel culture is that it certainly can elevate positions over people. And that means that the only goal in life is to defend one's identity and beliefs. That means that you need to be right. All that matters is about being right. Now, I'll be the first to admit, and many others will as well, most people in conversations when you're debating with somebody or having disagreement is you think you're right. And maybe you want to be right. You're trying to show them you're right and they're wrong. Their information they're getting is wrong. And sometimes you get frustrated because, you're like, I know I'm right. I mean, I've looked at this thing inside and out. I've done the research and I know I'm right about this. And maybe you are. In some cases, no doubt, maybe you are. But sometimes it happens is we get so focused on winning the argument and being right that we forget the person, and we end up damaging a relationship, or just really canceling the person, because they don't agree with our position. Okay. And then number two, as I say, remember, if you're dealing with someone where their core identity is wrapped up in their political views, they don't have their identity as an image bearer of God. They don't find their identity in Jesus or Christ, right? They don't have any other identity. They've got to find something else to identify with that is the core of who they are, that they get their core beliefs from, that what drives them every day, what gets them motivated, what gives them passion. It could be their politics. It's identity politics. It could be their ethnicity. They're focused on race. I don't like that word, but the point is that they're absolutely immersed in their ethnicity, and this is my core identity, and this is who I am, and I've got to fight for it all the time. Maybe you do, but the point is that, or maybe they're wrapped up in their sexuality. Their identity is definitely in their sexuality. Or in this case, over the last couple of years, maybe they found a new religion with COVID. They needed a purpose in life. They didn't have anything to cling to. Now they're the COVID police. And they've got to go out and tell you why you're right or wrong about this. And they've got to make sure you got the information about the vaccines, or you don't have the information. They've got to really teach you and make sure that you know. This is what's been happening. Obviously, people find their identity in these things. So if you press against that and tell someone, that their positions on these things are wrong, you're going to start having friction, right? Because for some people, this is their entire identity, right? And so it's very hard to talk about these issues. Sometimes you have to use a lot of wisdom and be very patient and be very calm. But we need to remember that they're people, right? There are people behind these views. You may not agree with them, may have the sharpest disagreements, but remember they're image bearers of God. Okay, they're creating the image and likeness of God. They're not just, someone to just be there, like they're just a position you're looking at. I mean, they're a person to begin with, right? We're all guilty of that. I'm sure we all are, wanting to just defend our position. I am as well. Now, let's talk a little bit about how we cannot be like cancel culture in some areas where maybe we are, and we certainly don't want to do that. As far as being rash and making quick judgments and being outraged very quickly, I think we probably know that James tells us to be slow to speak and quick to listen. We certainly, of all people in the culture, we should be the ones to slow down and give people due process to maybe defend themselves, maybe hear their point out, maybe hear what they're saying, maybe there's a reason they took that position, they said this or did that, versus just right away going to social media and seeing a meme or seeing something, you say, oh, look at that person is awful. Darn, I am outraged. Quick judgment. Wait a minute, just slow down, pull back a minute, okay? We need to make sure we're doing that with some people. I know it's very hard because social media is just putting out stuff all day long, and we're getting stuff on our phones and on the computer. It comes at us 24/7, okay? It says there's some proof texts about the ton. The proof text is where you take a verse out of context, which we really don't like to do when we study the Bible, because you need the whole context of the chapter and the book, but I don't have time to do that because most times we don't. And so I'm just going to give you some proof texts, but I don't like doing that. It's not a good habit. But James 3:9-12 says, with the tongue we praise our Lord and Father, with it we curse human beings who have been made in God's likeness. The same mouth can praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? My brothers and sisters, can a fig tree bear olive trees or grapevine bear figs? No, they can produce fresh water. So, it talks about, how sometimes with our tongue, obviously we can praise God, and other times we curse people with it all the time. I see people do this all the time. We're all guilty of it. There's some other proof texts, in Colossians 3:8, go back here. Colossians 3:8, it says here, but now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Colossians 4:6, another proof text. It says, let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt. So you may know how you should respond to each person or answer each person. Ephesians 4:29, let no corrupting talk come out of our mouths, but only such as is good for building up as it fits the occasion, that may be great, give grace to those who hear. Proverbs 13:3, whoever guards his mouth preserves his life. He who opens his lips comes to ruin. So, there's something called discipline of the tongue, and that can go right over into social media, to be honest, because a lot of times we're just posting our views on social media before thinking. We're just quickly, boom, throwing it out there, even if we can't say it verbally, but we're posting memes with quotes out of context. We're quoting opinions out of context. We're quoting people who have no authority in a specific field, but perhaps we need to show some restraint and really just slow down and think, okay, how is what I'm about to say or what I'm about to do on social media going to impact other people? How are people going to see this? And is that going to lead to edification? Is it going to lead to building up? Is it going to lead to, is it going to tear down? Is it going to end up causing more division by saying this? Now, sometimes truth can divide. I understand that. Sometimes people don't agree, but the point is that we really need to slow down a bit, right? Maybe think before we speak and not be so harsh and quick, like cancel culture does, right? We don't want to be like them. And then, of course, being spiteful. We're called to do the opposite. We're called to love our enemies, do good to those who hate you, and bless those who curse you. We know Jesus talks about this, and we know that vicious or obscene, hate-filled speech has no place in our life. I think that's pretty obvious. It's not really controversial. I did find it hilarious that when this church in Texas had people in the congregation with a "Let's Go Brandon" sign, or they were chanting it. I'm sorry, that they actually thought that was godly. And the pastor corrected this. He offered an apology, but I was just amazed that anyone who's following Jesus thought they could be filled with the Spirit and do that. Whatever you think about our president, I don't care. That's not the point of this call. But the point is that is not a sign of spirituality. It's not a sign of being filled with the Spirit. So anyway, just interesting how people can jump on that bandwagon so quickly, especially believers. And let's talk a little about judgmentalism. So the famous passage that Jesus quotes here, Matthew 7, that sometimes is taken out of context as well. When he says here, do not judge so that you will be judged, or do not judge so that you will not be judged. For the same way you judge, you will be judged. And by the standard of your measure will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck that is in your brother's eye, but not notice the log that is in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, and look at the log that is in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before pigs, or they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. So, of course, a lot of times this verse is taken, they read verse 1 here, do not judge so that you will not be judged. People read it and they don't read the rest of the verse or the chapter. And then they just yell at you and say, you're being judgmental. You're not allowed to judge. And of course, I say back to them, why are you judging me for judging? You're being judgmental. You're judging me for judging. Okay, that's a kind of a facetious thing. But the point is that if you read it in context, Jesus is not saying you can't make judgments. We all have to make judgments every day. We do that. We couldn't live as a society and live as individuals, couldn't do anything without making some judgments. The question is whether we're holding people to a standard that we don't meet ourselves. You know, are we really looking at people and automatically saying, oh, they don't measure up to what I think they should be, or they don't measure up to what God thinks they should be. And then in the meantime, we're struggling with the same thing in our own lives. We're probably all guilty of this on some level. And, you know, we can tend to, if we're going to be like cancel culture doesn't really have a filter. You know, they're not using the Bible as their filter. So they're just judging, like, they don't care if they are doing the same thing as others a lot of times. They're just going to judge it anyway, right? But for us as Christians, you know, we need to pull back and say, you know, before we start calling people out for specific sins and standards or shortcomings, you'd ask, are we guilty of these as well? In some cases we are, right? And so that's always been a hazard of that passage, because, you know, we tend to think we're the thought police sometimes, and we're allowed to call anyone out anytime. So let me give an example of something that happened over the last year or so, which was kind of ugly and kind of sad. If you haven't followed Ravi Zacharias' story, he was one of the most well-known Christian apologists in the world, spoke all over the world for several decades, wrote many books, very popular university speaker, incredibly gifted. I mean, you know, talk about a gifted speaker. I mean, he was so articulate, Indian born man that became a believer, Hindu background. You can, but anyway, the story came out that he fell into sexual sin, and that apparently he was abusive towards some women. You know, long story, came out all last year. You can read about, there was debate over what happened and if it was true. And to make a long story short, Ravi Zacharias' ministry ended. But he was dead when these accusations came out by these women. He was already dead. He could not really speak for himself. His family, of course, has somewhat responded to. You'd have to look online. I don't have time to go into the whole story. But what's interesting was I noticed when the story came out about him that he had really failed in some way sexually, that the way Christians reacted to his story. And probably about 80% of the Christians I was reading, like watching kind of these debates online, or many, I don't give a percentage, but many, Ravi was canceled very quickly, meaning that his action was unforgivable. There was no talk about redemption for him. Some said he's in hell now. He never repented. He's in hell because Ravi never came forward before he died and said, this is wrong, I did this. He just died. So he had no way to ever acknowledge it or ask for forgiveness. He just died, and there's no opportunity for forgiveness. So, but the point is, the community, the way they responded to him after he was dead and these accusations came out, is they just completely canceled him. No forgiveness for Ravi. He's done. God won't forgive him. No mercy. Many people judged him. He was a fraud all along. Some said he was a fraud all along. All these things. Christians just one by one sweeping down and saying they have the right to. They know exactly all the facts, and they just canceled Ravi like that. And so, I was on one social media page, and I was watching a lot of Christians do this. So I went ahead and called some people out. And I said, it's interesting that I'd like to ask anyone on this page tonight who is struggling with sexual sin in their life right now. How many people are struggling with some sort of sexual sin? And it got real quiet. And it wasn't that what Ravi did was, I'm not trying to defend him. That's not what I'm doing. I'm not saying he shouldn't be held accountable. That's not what I'm doing. But the point is that those that are so quick to judge him, I could almost say for sure on that page, we're struggling with sexual sin as well. And I've been around too long to know this is true, by the way. I still see it all the time today. But the point is that what if you did something that was absolutely awful in a biblical sin, like you did something that, God, I can't be forgetting that, which you can, by the way. What if everyone canceled you? Just canceled you? Would you like that? Would you like it if someone told you there's no room for restoration for you, no room for forgiveness, no room for mercy? Really? Now, I would agree that if you are unrepentant and you're not willing to deal with it, I agree that's an issue and you need help. Obviously, there has to be steps of restoration that involves your cooperation. But this issue of, I don't know if I really agree with, I'm not the ultimate judge of Ravi Zacharias. I don't know where he is right now. God knows. I don't have access to that throne room where I can know. God knows, okay? Yes, what he did was wrong. I still think some of the facts are still, kind of weird. I mean, the way the whole thing played out. But whatever the case, I just think Christians were a little too quick. And I think they need to slow down a little bit and examine themselves as well, okay? Because if you're living in sexual sin, meaning that either you're committing adultery with somebody, or maybe you just have a pornography habit, or else you have a huge lusting problem, or else you're messing around with somebody, I don't know. There's all kinds of sexual sins. If you're having that same problem in your own life, I highly advise you not to judge Ravi. You should be taking care of your own sin, okay? And I will guarantee there are people out there that judge Ravi harshly that have sexual sins in their own lives. I'd be willing to bet on it. Okay, so that's a case where somebody was. I think there's a case where maybe a little bit too much judging before plucking the eye out and looking at themselves. And so, also, when we judge the culture around us, we're constantly making judgments, saying this is right, this is wrong. You're not, this is a biblical view of this, and this is sin over here, and this part of the culture is wrong. The gay thing's wrong. Transgenderism is wrong. This is wrong. We have positions. I know we do, and I'll talk about that. But when we're trying to hold people to standard that they don't have eyes to see or ears to hear, when they don't even have our worldview, it's kind of like just throwing our pearls before swine, right? We are just sometimes wasting our time. We're trying to hold people to a standard they are not even close to, okay? Now, having said that, as I say, number 2 here, as Jesus set the example, definitely we're called to speak the truth in love. I'm not talking about not speaking our convictions and having our positions. We have to have those, yes. In many cases, we are telling people that this is where we stand on this, and this is our view, this is our conviction, this is our biblical position. We're not going to budge on that. But for the same token, we can't expect people to adhere to our conviction if they don't even, first of all, they don't know the Lord, they don't have any of our worldview. It's going to be harder, right? And so, sometimes I watch people spend hours on social media debating people on biblical standards, and it can be fruitless. You're talking about somebody who's blinded by a different worldview. They don't have the eyes to see, the ears to hear. So just think about that next time. And sometimes people quote 1 Peter 4:17, where Peter says that it's time for judgment to begin at the household of God first. It begins with us. What will be the outcome for those who do not obey the gospel? And so, we read the context of that passage where Peter is exhorting the church, the ecclesia, the house of God, which is in that context facing persecution, right? He's writing to a group of persecuted believers. He's talking about those. He's exhorting those to separate. They were struggling to separate from their former worldly sins, right? That those sins that have enslaved them. You read that in verses 1-4 there before you get to, later on in the chapter. And he talks about how the wicked obviously will face God's judgment, but we have to hold ourselves to a higher standard, right? And we, of course, will face a judgment seat as well. We face the bema seat of Christ. We do face a judgment. Okay, that's called the bema seat. And so judgment does come to us first, right? God, we need to look at inside our community, right? Instead of always looking out there and trying to always fix that problem out there, we need to look within ourselves. And of course, we know that churches and Christians have all kinds of problems, right? Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians 5. He says, what business of mine to judge those outside the church? Are you not to judge the inside? So we're supposed to take responsibility for the insiders. We're in the community. We have to look inward first, right? We can't call people outside the church to sexual purity if we're having sexual purity problems, right? We can't call people to not divorce if we've got divorce all throughout the church. We can't call people to live pure before marriage and not have, premarital sex if we have that all throughout the church. The list goes on. You get my point, is that it's really behooves us that we keep judging the outsider constantly when we don't look inwardly and we don't look inside the community at large. We've got a lot of problems ourselves. Now, another thing that we've done probably to contribute a little bit to cancel culture, which we actually look like we are canceling some people or groups, is that there's always been a history in Christian church, within Christianity. There was always this. I should say, there's a period of history where fundamentalism arose. It was a reaction to some of the liberalism that started with those that rejected the fundamentals of the faith, like the virgin birth, the deity of Christ, the atonement, the resurrection of Jesus, where they rejected those core fundamentals of the faith, those beliefs. And then what happened was a lot of the Christian community started to separate, pull out of certain parts of society. We began to separate from many kinds of people groups. Of course, we still do this to this day. Of course, we separate from some cases we have to. I understand pornography and certain kinds of groups. I mean, we have here, maybe we separate from abortion rights activists, feminists, Hollywood. Sometimes we used to condemn working stay-at-home dads and working moms. That was the thing. Some people still condemn that. And of course we pulled out of the secular university. We started our own Bible college and seminaries. So we became kind of separatist on that realm. So we kind of canceled the public universities, which a lot of them were started by Christians to begin with. And, we obviously been a lot of times, we've been known for blaming the moral decay of America on certain social sins or certain sins. We blame it on the ungodly instead of looking inwardly at ourselves and looking at our own community. So in a way, we sometimes, maybe we don't say it to ourselves, we're not canceling them. We love these people, but in a way, we don't have anything to do with them. We pulled out from some of these areas and tried to separate. Okay. Now, extreme form of fundamentalism would be someone that just like, I am going to separate from all these kinds of people groups and everything. I'm not going to engage anybody. I'm just going to wait to go to heaven when I die. And I'm just going to live out in the middle of nowhere and just stay within my people group here and my like-minded friends. I'm never going to get out of it. And I'm just going to sit here and just be around Bible-believing Christians all my life. Well, you've kind of not allowed yourself to do anything Jesus asked you to do, because you definitely have separated yourself. You're in that position. So you'll have to figure that one out. Going back to this text here on not judging in Matthew 7, we just read it. He kind of gives a standard here. He talks about the plank and the speck as standards. The key is that we also do not go after the small things in people's lives while we have larger issues, right? And certainly I believe that maybe some of us, we may not outwardly judge, like we may not say anything, but we secretly judge. We're behind the scenes, like in our minds going, oh, look at that. Oh, I'm glad I'm not like that. Oh, look at their lives. Or perhaps we just think we're fruit inspectors, right? We're always inspecting people's fruit. Like, oh, that fruit is not showing there, and I'm your fruit inspector, and I can see it, even if you don't see it. We tuck it away, like, I'm glad I bear that fruit there, but that person isn't bearing fruit there. So sometimes we end up judging the small things while we definitely have larger issues, and that's a problem, right? I don't know if you guys know Michael Brown. He's been on here a few times. Very famous, well-known Messianic Jewish apologist, written that 5-volume set, Answering Jewish Objections to Jesus. Well-known author, writer for The Stream, written several books, done a lot of debates, spoken outwardly about his views on the gay topic, transgender topic, all kinds of topics. Then he released a book on food, the power of the stronghold of food, because I've known Dr. Brown for a number of years, and I knew him in his larger years, as you see here, when he was, before he lost all this weight and went on this fitness kick. And he told me, or he's told others, that one of the reasons he did that was, I'm out in the culture, calling sins out as wrong. I'm speaking against same-sex marriage and speaking out against, cultural purity, and I'm speaking about this or that. And here I am having eating problems. I'm look at me, I'm not in shape. I'm out, I'm not where I should be physically, health-wise. And it's a bad witness. So he decided to fix that area of his life because he felt that he was possibly, being judgmental towards other, specific sins, but he had to look inwardly and fix some things in his own life. Michael's a very godly man, but that was really interesting. So you can get his book, by the way, The Stronghold of Food, but Michael is just fit as a fiddle today, as you can see here on the right side. Looks like a totally different guy. I've been out to eat with him too. So anyway, I haven't been out with him since he lost this weight, so I don't know what he's going to eat when I'm with him. He might just pull out like an orange, and that's it. Well, this giant dish of pasta, for all I know. But anyway, I have to ask him what he eats anymore at his dinner table. Sometimes we're like cancel culture. Sometimes we can be like them when we begin to assess what someone believes about elections, politics, gender, sexuality, and COVID. And then what we can tend to do, which is like culture, cancel culture, which you don't want to do, by the way, is we devalue the person. And what that means is that we elevate our positions over people. As I said before, we end up caring more about winning the argument or defending our positions than the person. Now, once again, I'll say it again. Yes, you need to have positions. Yes, you need to know what you believe. Yes, you need convictions. We need those things. Absolutely. But sometimes when we get in these heated debates and we look at social media and we're so polarized, we need to ask ourselves, are we doing what cancel culture does? Are we devaluing the person? Or are we doing what we should be doing, where we may disagree with someone, but we still need to view them as an image bearer of God, right? They have value and dignity. They're created in the image and likeness of God. Yes, I don't agree with them, but they're created in the image and likeness of God. We have to keep that in front at all times, right? Say to yourselves, there goes an image bearer of God. Oh, image bearer of God. Oh, I don't agree with this person, but they're an image bearer of God. Yes, I need to remember that, okay? May not be easy, but we don't want to devalue the person. Now, what about when you have disagreements with a fellow believer? Someone that is a follower of the Messiah, someone that has the same worldview you have on spiritual things, like they believe who Jesus is and all those issues, and he rose from the dead, and mostly agree with you on Bible issues. But there's some areas, maybe it could be some things I just mentioned, maybe back here, like I told you before on these calls, there are people I know that I know people all across the spectrum on politics. I know people that are hardcore in this direction or that direction, in the middle. I know people have different positions on COVID. I know people that have debated it. I've had my own debates. I know there's people that are all across the spectrum, right? Believers, I'm talking about believers, right? And we need to understand that it's okay to disagree. One thing for sure, if we agree on the essentials of the faith, we agree on who Jesus is. He died and rose from the dead. He's the only way for forgiveness. He's coming back. He's virgin born. The Bible is an authority. It's the word of God. Jesus is God, the Trinity, all those essentials. If we agree on those, it's okay to disagree on some of these other issues. We may just have to say, look, we just disagree. Let's move on. Let's focus on what we agree on, right? Because you end up just destroying a relationship sometimes, right? Now, what about number two? Can some disagreements lead to toxic relationships? Yes, they can. No doubt about it, and that has happened. And sometimes with believers, sadly. But is it okay to ever end a relationship over disagreement? You may have to. I don't know. If you simply cannot agree and the person takes it so very hard and it's so dear to them, that position is so dear to them, then they may want to just end that relationship with you. I lost, let's see, what relationship did I lose? It wasn't a long debate, but about 8 months ago, I had a friend of mine I used to disciple for a long time, but he started texting me about COVID issues, and I sent back a text that he didn't agree with, and I've never heard from him. I haven't heard from him ever since. It's been 8 months. So, maybe he canceled me. I don't know. But see, he takes it so personally that, it's that's what he did. Now, I also recently had a friend of mine who's actually a doctor. Now, this person's not a believer, but I mean, he's from a different religious faith. But he's a doctor of a hospital. He's actually a director of a hospital. And we started talking about COVID. I had COVID in December, so I was talking about it. And we started getting some disagreements. You know what I said to him? I said, you know what? I don't think this is probably not a good topic for us. Let's focus on what we're here to do. And we were there that day to do something. We already had something we were doing together that day because we had the common interest. I said, let's just focus on this. So because I don't want our friendship to be damaged. And he agreed. He agreed 100%. So sometimes that has to happen. That's what you have to do. You need to do that with believers. Obviously, God doesn't. If we're believers, we should be able to have disagreements and move forward. There's people I disagree with. I love them dearly, but I have strong disagreements with them. And sometimes I can't talk to them about certain issues because I know it's a hot button and I don't talk to them about it. But I wish them all the best and I'm friends. I still love them, but, I may not, be able to, be around them all the time because, that topic may come up. But there's no ill will or resentment. So you don't want to fall in a situation where, there's a lot of ill will and resentment. And remember, if there's someone that really does do something to you, you can forgive them. But you can always forgive them. You can release them over to God. But reconciliation is a different thing. Whether reconciliation is possible may be a whole different ball game. Okay, sometimes relationships go their separate ways. And while there may be no unforgiveness, but forgiveness may happen, you still may be able to retain that relationship. It just depends, okay? But so anyway, now, once again, I'll say it again. You need to have your positions, beliefs, or convictions. Absolutely. And there'll be times where you need to speak up. And I understand that. We need to be able to speak up. But if someone disagrees with you, don't devalue them. Don't cancel them, okay? Remember, they're people creating the image of God, all right? And remember that the world around us is watching how we as Christians treat each other. People are watching when we disagree how we treat each other. Okay. I've been convicted of this. I know others have been convicted of this, but the watching world is seeing how we treat one another if we disagree. Do we love one another, as 1 John 4 talks about? Hebrews talks about we're called to encourage each other, spurring each other to love and good works. We're called to serve one another, instruct one another, honor one another, be patient with one another, and forgive one another, and bear each other's burdens, of course, and speak the truth to one another. So, those are just some of the guidelines on how we're supposed to treat each other, right? But a lot of times believers treat each other the way cancel culture treats each other. So that is not good. And of course, Jesus says, by this, everyone will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. So he says that is the mark of a believer. Okay. And so it's a good thing when, Unbelievers can see believers disagreeing and still loving one another. That's really a good testimony, okay, versus just canceling them. Like, I'm done with you. Done with you. You know, you're out of my life and you're a terrible person. You don't want to do that. Because we're called to live counterculturally. It means we're supposed to be different from the culture. Now, is there anything positive from cancel culture? Yes, there's a few things. Believe it or not, it can cause our faith to be put into action. That means that, because that's what our faith is intended to do. You know, we have to sometimes opposition, you know, creates opportunities. You know, like I said back here, I said back in the previous slide, my friend Frank Turk, when he was canceled by a couple of companies, that gave him opportunities to not only show love and forgiveness, because he didn't sue the company, he could have sued them, which a lot of people thought he should have. But he didn't do that. And he also exposed areas. He talked about truth. He talked about being what tolerance really is. He gave an opportunity to teach on a lot of things about what true tolerance really is and how, you know, they were not being tolerant of him. So it gave him opportunities to talk about things, obviously to educate Christians about things. One thing that's really positive about cancel culture is it can force us and churches and leaders to make it clear what we really believe, where we stand on certain issues. There's nothing worse than going to a congregation where you don't know where they stand, where you don't know where the leaders stand. Now, maybe there's some things they never talked about because it's a new thing that arises, but there's a lot of things I can tell you that people get frustrated when they go to their congregation and they're like, you know, they want to take a stance on something, and maybe they do, but they have no idea where anyone else stands on it in their own congregation. Nobody. Maybe they don't want to talk about it because they're worried it's going to divide people. Maybe they're worried it's too much of a sensitive topic. But it's really refreshing when leaders come out and they make it clear where they stand. It really helps the congregation. So if you're a leader here or you're in some sort of ministry position, teaching position, they'll really help your people. Okay, maybe it's just a group of people you associate with regularly. You know, they know where you stand can really help. Okay. And one thing for sure, as I just about to wrap up here, is that you know, one thing cancel culture can do, it gets us to reposition our hope where it really is. Hope is, you know, obviously in the Lord God of the universe and in the resurrection of the Messiah, right? That's where our true hope is, in him. And that hope is what allows us to live beyond this chaos that we're in, beyond this cancel culture where we're not just consumed by it and it's driving us crazy, right? We don't need to fear the current cancel culture, as I say, number 3. If you're living in so much fear of the cancel culture, remember the Messiah cannot be canceled, okay? He's never been able to be canceled. People have tried it for 2,000 years. His community is still here, okay? Many of history's leaders have tried to cancel his community, have tried to stomp it out, tried to get rid of it, but it doesn't work. It's because he promised it would never die. And Jesus is still on the throne. So quit worrying all the time what cancel culture can do to you, okay? Start focusing on who the Messiah is. Remember, your hope is in him, okay? And then remember, finally, perhaps we need to be known what we really are for, not what we're against. I think a lot of times we're only known for the things we stand against and not what we're for. Meaning that people say, oh, you're a believer, you're against same-sex marriage, you're against transgenderism, you're against this, you're against that. Well, it's true, we have positions on those things. And yes, we are saying that the biblical position is a better position, obviously, and we think it's true. But, you know, remember, we need to be known by what we're for. Okay, think about that. What do you want people to be known? If you want to be known for something, do people know what you're for, not just what you're against? Okay? All righty. So that's about it, folks. I think that's it. Yeah. So I will go back to you guys. We went for about an hour. And now we open up to discussion. I will stop recording.